5 times children remembered their past lives. Everyone has had that weird feeling that we are remembering something from the past, but are not sure what. Some people call it deja vu, but in these 5 true stories of kids remembering a past life, it is called just plain creepy. Our first story takes us all the way to the Turkish village of Sarkanak. In the village, a pregnant woman named Unsee was pregnant. Like most pregnant women, she had very vivid dreams. She even had a dream in which a man identified himself as Salem Fesley appeared to her. His face was bloody, and he held his left ear as if he was in pain. Her pregnancy passed, and when her son was born, his left ear was small and deformed. She named the baby Tariq. As soon as Tariq could talk, he would point to himself and say, Salem. As the child grew older, he became more instant that his family and friends call him Salem. When the boy was 4 years old, he walked to the neighboring village. A village where in 1958, a man named Salem had been shot in the left ear and died in a field. His neighbor claimed that he had shot Salem on accident when he had been out hunting and was not held accountable for Salem's death. When the boy arrived in the village, he walked right to the home of Salem's widow. He told her, I am your husband, and you are my wife. He shared intimate details of their life together. The boy said that the neighbor had killed him, or Salem, on purpose, and wanted him held accountable. The villagers did not believe this story. The boy, who continued to call himself Salem, led a double life, living in the village with his mother, but often visiting the woman he called his wife, and even treating her children as his own. The boy maintained that they lived with a murderer in the village, and never recanted the story of his death. Let's move on to our next story and meet James Leininger. James was similar to other boys in that he liked to play with toy airplanes. His parents, Andrea and Bruce, say that in fact, no matter how many other toys they bought James, he would only play with toy airplanes. When James was 2, his beloved toy airplanes started to become the object of nightmares. Andrea and Bruce say that James would wake up screaming. He would scream and his eyes had a faraway haunted look. James would scream that he was on fire and couldn't get out. His parents videotaped James when he was 3. He was playing in the backyard like any normal child. He is heard and seen on the videotape performing a complicated pre-flight check. James used words that only someone familiar with the mechanics of a plane would know. His parents wondered where he could have learned such a thing. The nightmares continued. The nightmare got worse. They started to become violent. James would throw himself to the ground and thrash about. They took him to a child psychologist. Eventually, James began to talk about his memories. Nearly 6 decades earlier, a 21-year-old fighter pilot on a mission over the Pacific was shot down by enemy artillery, and James remembered his life in vivid detail. James also remembered his death in vivid detail. He remembered the pilot's death because it was his own death. Over time, James would reveal more details about his past life. James said that the plane he flew was a Corsair and said that they were always getting flat tires. That model plane is notorious for having tire problems. James told his parents on that fateful flight to his death, he had taken off from the Natoma Bay and he had flown with someone named Jack Larson. After some careful research, his parents found the Natoma Bay had been a small aircraft carrier in the Pacific, and Jack Larson had been a real pilot on the Natoma Bay. James' father became obsessed with finding out the truth about his son. He discovered there had been one pilot that had been killed over the Pacific that had taken off from the Natoma Bay, and his name had also been James, just like his son, James Huston Jr. As soon as James could write, James would write his name James Jr. James's parents believed that their son is the reincarnated James Huston Jr. They even wrote a letter to James Huston's sister, and she believes it too. The golden age of Hollywood, the 1930s, a time that no one would want to leave. Maybe some wanted to stay so bad that after death, they came back and tried to return. Marty Martin was born in 1903. He was the son of Ukrainian immigrants. He had 2 sisters, one of which died in childhood. Morris and his sister eventually found themselves in the Big Apple, where Morris found some success on Broadway. Morris ended up in Hollywood working steadily under the stage name Marty Martin. When his Hollywood movie opportunities dried up for him, he started a successful talent agency. Marty was married 4 times and had a biological child and adopted 3 of his stepchildren, all sons. He lived in the posh Beverly Hills neighborhood of Roxbury Drive. Marty loved the South California lifestyle, but eventually died of leukemia at the age of 61. Ryan Hammonds was born 40 years after the death of Marty Martin. Cindy is Ryan's mom, and she is a devout Christian. Ryan's speech was delayed by a condition involving enlarged adenoids. After Ryan had his adenoids removed, he finally started speaking complete sentences. He was 4 years old, and the first words he spoke were detailing a past life. Ryan immediately started to beg his mother Cindy to take him home to Hollywood. Ryan said he needed to go back to Hollywood and take care of his biological child and his 3 adopted sons. He would eventually become angry with his mother and yell at her that she would never work in Hollywood again if she didn't do what he wanted. He would scream that his agency handles all the best talent in Hollywood. Ryan would tell her that he had a large home with a pool in the backyard and it was on Roxbury Drive. Ryan even did complicated dance routines and said he knew them from his time on Broadway. Ryan told his mother he knew from his time in heaven, watching her, and he knew she had wanted a girl. Cindy later said that she had never told anyone about her secret wish that her child be a girl. Ryan said that he saw her cry in the bathroom when she found out she was having a boy. Cindy decided to research Ryan's claims, and they checked out a book from the library. The devout Christian said that it was almost like something was pulling Ryan to a page of old Broadway posters. When he saw Marty Martin, he said that was him. Ryan's mom took him to a child psychologist that specialized in similar cases, and they flew out to Los Angeles. They drove to Roxbury Drive in Beverly Hills, and Ryan recognized Marty's old house instantly. Ryan went on to meet his past life daughter and to study his past life religion, Judaism. Sometimes past lives come in pairs, as is the case for twin sisters Savanthi and Shiromi. These Sri Lankan twin sisters were born in 1978. Savanthi was born with a very prominent circle birthmark right on her upper abdomen. When the twins were just 2.5 years old, Savanthi began speaking about a past life. She went into intricate detail about the things that had happened to her in her previous life. At just 2 years old, she said that she had been shot in the stomach while jumping into the ocean. Savanthi then pointed to her birthmark and said that is where she was shot. Months later, she started referring to herself as Robert and said that had been her name. She said that she had been shot by the Sri Lankan police during the insurgency. Savanthi's family was curious about these claims and found records of a man named Robert who had been shot during the insurgency in 1971. They reached out to this man and his family, and they sent the brother of Robert's lover, a man named Johnny, who had also been shot and killed, to visit Savanthi. As soon as the brother walked in, Shiromi, who had never spoken about a past life before, said, "My brother has come to see me," and begun to speak of her past life as Johnny, an insurgent and Robert's lover. The twins recognized places from their past life. They even displayed behavior that was in line with past lives they lived, such as a fear of khaki uniforms and jeeps, both used by Sri Lankan police. The girls wanted to dress masculine and engage in masculine activities. They even wanted to smoke. The most troubling piece of past life behavior, both children knew how to make a bomb. We leave you with one last tale of past lives. Some children remember lives that were never fully lived. When Angie was 23, she had an unplanned pregnancy. She was surprised but happy and slowly began to plan her life as a single mom. She didn't tell many people, not because she was ashamed, just she wasn't ready. At 5 months pregnant, she began to bleed in the night. She called her sister who lived nearby, and they went to the hospital. Doctors attempted to stop the bleeding, but sadly, they could not, and Angie suffered a miscarriage. She was saddened by the loss of the baby she had decided to name Monica. Years passed, and Angie began to rebuild from her loss. She eventually fell in love and got married. When she got pregnant, 10 years after the loss of her baby, Monica, she was so happy. She hoped and prayed that she would not lose the baby, and all her hoping worked. She gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. She named Marie. Marie and her mother Angie were bonded tightly, just like any mother and daughter are, but their bond seemed a little stronger. One day, when Marie was 3 years old, Angie fell and hurt her ankle. Angie cried, and Marie came to her mother and said, "Don't cry, Mommy. I know it made you sad when I had to leave the last time, but this time I will stay." Angie asked Marie what she meant, and the child said, "The last time I was in your tummy, I left because it wasn't time, but I came back. Maybe they always do come back. So the next time you experience the feelings of deja vu or meet someone you seem to already know, maybe it isn't just a feeling. Maybe you have been here before.